Hi there, and welcome. Today I'm going to be walking through a solution that I wrote about a few months ago. It's gained a lot of traction since then, and I wanted to do a quick video about it. So I'm going to be going over what I've dubbed the ASE killer today, which allows us to create private connectivity, both from the internet and hybrid, to an app service using Private Link without the use of an application service environment. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the solution that I'm presenting today is one that I've written about in the past and has really gained a lot of traction because a lot of customers want to run app services but don't want to pay the stamp cost for the application service environment to get the private networking control. So the solution that I've come up with here is represented in this architecture diagram and is not terribly complicated on paper. It gets a little bit more difficult in configuration, but still not too terribly bad. What we're going to start out with building here is a virtual network, and from there we're going to go and build our app service, tie that into the private link endpoint, set up an application gateway that gives us the public connectivity, and then build the private connectivity across a site-to-site VPN. All of this is going to go through the private link endpoint, and that's really where everything comes together. The application service will only accept traffic from the private link endpoint, and the application gateway and VPN gateway will send all their traffic for the app service to that private link endpoint. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch over here and start out by building my virtual network. Let's create a resource group for this. I'm going to call this PriVNet, and I'm going to put this in East US. I'm just going to take the default address space. I am going to remove this subnet though, and I'm going to add a couple of my own. So the first subnet that I'm going to add is the app gateway subnet, and that's going to be the 10.0.0.0/24 network. I don't need to add any service endpoints. Similar with the web app private link, which is going to be 10.1.0.0/24. Oops. And again, I don't need to add any service endpoints here. If we just had a solution that needed private connectivity from an application gateway and we did not need hybrid connectivity, we could use service endpoints and not have to use private link. We are going to use private link here, so we won't need to be leveraging service endpoints. So that's pretty much it for right now. Go ahead and create that virtual network. And as soon as that submits, let's see here, so we're kicking off the virtual network installation. Let's go ahead and build the sample app service. So the virtual network has completed. I'm going to check my region here just to make sure. So this is in the East US. And that's going to be important because we'll need to integrate with the virtual network in that region. So I'm going to go ahead and build the web app. Same resource group. I'm going to call this Web App 01 for creativity. And I'm going to use the runtime stack. It doesn't really matter what it is. I'm not going to actually put anything into this application service for the purpose of this demonstration, just loading a page. What is important though is that I do choose the same region and that I choose the right SKU. So the SKU that I'm going to choose is a P1v2. Private link endpoints for app services are only supported with v2 SKUs right now. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that and review and create. All right. So while that's deploying, let's go back and look at our diagram. So we've created our virtual network, 2 of them anyways. We've not yet created the gateway subnet for the VPN gateway, and that's okay. We've just created our application service, and now we're going to start integrating some of these things together. So the next thing that I want to create after I verify that the app service is created is the private link endpoint. All right, so the deployment of the application service is complete. I'm going to go to the app service real quick and make sure that everything's functioning. So this is a standard out-of-the-box app service, nothing special here yet. I'm going to grab this URL and from my own workstation, just make sure that it shows up. So we get the default page for that runtime stack and everything comes up, so it looks like we're in good shape. So what I'm going to do now is go set up that private link. There's a couple different ways of going about this. I'm going to go to the private link center, and we're going to be creating a private endpoint, not a private link service, but a private endpoint. I'm going to create a new endpoint, and we'll call this Web App Private Link. Put this in East US because that's where our virtual network is. And in the resource type, we're going to grab Microsoft.web sites. So that is the resource type that we're leveraging behind the scenes with the resource provider of the application service. I'm going to go ahead and select the Pri Web App 01, which is the app service that we just created. And there's only one target sub-resource here, which is sites. You can see that it picked up the VNet that exists in East US right now, and it chose the correct subnet, which is nice. The Web App Private Link subnet, which is where the network interface for the private endpoint is going to reside. I'm going to go ahead and integrate this with private DNS. We don't have to do this if we want to host our own, but I am going to go ahead and allow that to create its own zone. So we'll kick off the creation of that. And I'll be back in a second when this is done creating. And I'm back. So the deployment took about 5-6 minutes to fully complete for the private endpoint. We can go take a look and see what it configured. So it's in the right location, which is great. We have it linked to the web app, which is great. The web app, the network interface, and the VNet and subnet in which it resides. So one of the things that I want to note here is, although I will give one other way that we can confirm this is the case, once you enable this web application for private link services, it stops responding otherwise. So this is the page that we had pulled up beforehand, the Pri Web App 01, and it loaded fine. If I refresh this now, you can see I get a 403, and that's because it's enabled with private link. So only traffic from within private link is now going to be accepted to that application. One other way, just if you want to do this, not necessary at all, but some people like the feeling of one extra layer of verification. We can go grab the private IP address of the network interface that's designated for private link, 10.0.1.4. And what we can do is go into our app service, and down here under networking, we have a section called access restrictions. Access restrictions is more useful when you're doing service endpoints than private link, but just to confirm that we are only allowing private link, we can create an access restriction here that only allows that one IP address, 10.0.1.4, which is the IP address of the network interface for private link. So we're going to add that rule. It creates successfully. Nothing changes from the perspective of my local browser because, again, I still can't reach it. I don't have access to that private link endpoint. So what's next? All right, we have created our virtual network. We have created our app service. We've created the private link endpoint. And now what we need to create is the application gateway. And once we do that, we can start to tie all these things together. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to jump back out and create an application gateway. This is a layer 7 firewall that allows HTTP traffic to be filtered and routed appropriately. So the application gateway name, app gateway private link, we can call that whatever we'd like. I do have to drop this in the correct region because, again, I'm going to be integrating to that subnet I created in the virtual network in East US. So we can see now that I have my appropriate virtual network. It's again selected the correct subnet app gateway, which is great. The front ends that we're going to create: app gateway, public IP. The backend that I'm going to be building is actually for private link. So web app, and here is where I'm going to need to put in the private IP address of private link. So again, this is the 10.0.1.4 address for private link, because the app gateway will only be communicating with the private link endpoint. It won't actually be communicating with the app service. So next on configuration, set up our routing rules. I'm going to call this HTTP to HTTPS, and you'll see why here in a second. The front end, since I don't have a cert on hand, I'm going to create an HTTP listener, although we will be using HTTPS in the back end. So I'm going to use that public IP that I just created for the front end IP, listening on port 80. I don't need to do any additional configuration for the front end. The backend target is going to be the web app backend that we created, but we do need to create a new HTTP setting. Here's where we're going to select HTTPS. So the app gateway is going to be communicating through private link to the app service over HTTPS. I'm going to use a well-known CA. We're not using any private certs here, so this will work fine. And leave everything else default except for hostname override. So the hostname override is where we have to have the application call, the application gateway rather, call the app service by its DNS name. So everything with private link has to use a DNS name, and this is no exception. So what I need to do is grab the DNS name, fully qualified domain name, of the app service. And so what it's going to be doing is going to the 10.0.1.4 address, but requesting it with this DNS name. That's something that private link requires. You can go read some more of the private link documentation if you'd like additional information on that. And it's why we also had to create our private DNS zone. So since application gateway resides within our VNet and we've integrated the private DNS into our environment, the app gateway knows how to resolve everything that it needs to resolve. So we're going to go ahead and save. We've got our backend targets fully configured, as well as our front end. Next is review and create. I will go ahead and kick this off, and while that's going, I'm going to go do one more thing. So we need to go now back to our virtual network. And now that we have created the application gateway, I need to go in and create the VPN gateway so that we can get our hybrid connectivity working as well. So the first thing that I need to do is go create a new gateway subnet. Gateway subnet is not going to be anything fancy here. It's just the specific subnet name and address space dedicated to the virtual network gateway. And once that's created, we'll go back out and create our gateway. This will allow us to do our site-to-site VPN, which will give us that hybrid connectivity to the app service as well. Again, this is going to go in East US. Select our Pri VNet. This automatically selects the gateway subnet. I'm going to give it a front-end IP address, or public IP address rather, and create. This deployment will take anywhere in between 15 and 35 minutes in my experience. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, and we'll be back when it's done. All right, and I'm back. So that did take a pretty long time to finish. The virtual network gateway is one of the longest lead times for creation in Azure. But what I also did was go ahead and configure the site-to-site VPN. I'm not covering that specifically here. If you want to know more about what I did, I'm happen to be using a Palo Alto firewall in my office here, and that's what I configured. I have a blog post on how to use that Palo Alto pfSense and a few others as well. But next, let's go ahead and take a look at what we have. So the virtual network gateway did finish creating, and this is what we're using to create that site-to-site connection that we have depicted here on this diagram. Like I said, I'm not walking through that, but we do have the connection status that has not yet refreshed, but is created, and we'll take a look at that here shortly. So second to that was the application gateway. Application gateway did finish creating, and what I want to do here is make sure that this does have connectivity back to the web app. So inside the public IP address of the app gateway, I'm going to go ahead and give this a DNS label just to help us depict in the browser what's what. And once that's saved, we'll give that a shot. So if what we created worked, that should give us access back to the web app. And remember, this is the web app's native name here. This is still forbidden. Nothing's changed there. But if we open up the app gateway DNS label that we just created, this does send us back to the app service. Perfect. So again, yes, not secure. I don't happen to have a cert on hand for lab environment here, but this sends us all the way back to the app service, which is exactly what we wanted. No public connectivity outside of the app gateway. So the last thing that we need to confirm is, now that we have finished the app gateway, and we know that connectivity from the app gateway to private link endpoint works, and back to app service, and then back out to the internet, we need to then confirm that the gateway subnet is functioning as well. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my local machine here. And what I need to do is, if you recall, through private link, everything needs to be referenced with a fully qualified domain name. So if I were to take the IP address of the private link endpoint, let's go grab that again real quick, 10.0.1.4. If I were to throw that in the browser, nothing shows up. Now, what I need to do, since with hybrid connectivity, DNS stories are a little bit different, what I'm going to do is, for the lab environment, just add this address into my local host file. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and open up PowerShell. Oops. Go grab my hosts file. And in my hosts file, I have 10.0.1.4 is the IP address. And this is the name of the web application. So we're actually calling, similar to what we did with the application gateway, is we're calling the DNS name, fully qualified domain name of the app service, but we are referencing it through the IP address of the private link endpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and this is my local browser still. And if you recall, we had a 403 when we were accessing it over the public network before, but now it loads. So to confirm what we've done there is I'll go ahead and just do a quick ping, and you see that the private link, or rather the application service, is now being routed through 10.0.1.4, which is across my site-to-site VPN, goes into the virtual network gateway, goes up into private link, and then goes into the app service. And we were able to test through the app gateway as well that traffic from the app gateway was able to reach all the way back through private link to the app service. And that's it. So what we've done here is take a standard app service without the use of an application service environment and having to pay the stamp fees, and created both hybrid and public connectivity while keeping the app service directly inaccessible. Everything goes through private link. And if we wanted to here, we could actually reroute the traffic from the virtual network gateway up into the app gateway as well, if we wanted to protect ourselves from HTTP type threats. The web application firewall capabilities of the application gateway will allow us to do that, both from the internet side and internally as well. So rather than the traffic flowing that way, we could have the traffic come from on-prem and bounce over to the app gateway, and then go to the private link endpoint, and then go to app service if we wanted that control there. But with that, we've created this solution. I hope this has been useful. Please comment below if you have any questions. Otherwise, I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.